Covenant had way better tech and were smarter. Eventually, the following events would lead to Noble Team invading a Corvette in Covenant-occupied space and sending a slipspace bomb inside of the thing to try and blow up the Long Knife Souls as Covenant supercarrier. The Covenant supercarrier did blow up. Jorge sacrificed his life thinking he just saved Reach, but in fact a massive Covenant fleet was on its way. And in the end, sadly, Jorge's death didn't really matter in the end as Reach fell, sadly. So can we have a F in the chat for my boy Jorge? F in the chat. And this cutscene will show you what happens once the Long Knife Souls explodes.
Tell him to make it count.
Slipspace rupture detected.
Gamma station control, reading multiple pings below the orbital defense grid.
Slipspace rupture detected.
Yeah, we're picking up anomalies too. Are you reading it?
Slipspace rupture
Multiple
detected.
Covenant signatures.
Slipspace
Is anyone
rupture
listening?
detected.
They're everywhere.
Slipspace
Yeah,
rupture
must be
detected.
the whole damn Covenant fleet.
Slipspace rupture detected.
The Battle of Reach was brutal indeed. Each Noble Team member had sacrificed their lives for saving, at least trying to save the planet, while a ship had escaped to space called the Pillar of Autumn, which would play some further roles in events in the Halo storyline. Hopefully, this could get the one rumored as the last Spartan out of there. Eventually, the Pillar of Autumn, which carried the rumored last Spartan known as Master Chief or John 117, had a random slipspace jump and found a Halo ring. As you know, a mass destructive weapon. Meanwhile, the Covenant ensued, chasing after the Pillar of Autumn to wipe the ship out. Luckily, they weren't fast enough to destroy it before it could land on the ring. If this ship wasn't shot down before Master Chief evacuated to a lifeboat, Master Chief might have not lived. And since this didn't happen, Master Chief landed safely on the ring along with the rest of the crew of the Pillar of Autumn. Because of this mistake that the Covenant made, the Covenant were already screwed from the start. There was no way they would be able to fight off a heretical demon as they called the Spartan 2s. But what the Covenant and the humans didn't know would surprise them once they would discover the secret that the Halo rings have been hiding, and also the truth about the Halos. Meanwhile, eventually, skirmishes between the Covenant and the humans would eventually lead into the Flood intervening, as the Covenant accidentally stumble upon Flood. Eventually, they met the monitor of the installation known as 343 Guilty Spark, and Master Chief and him managed to get the activation index to activate Halo, but then Cortana came in at the last second to tell Master Chief what the Halo really did. Kill every single sentient being in the galaxy. well, not the galaxy, but like a 25,000 light year radius to starve the flood. Once Master Chief noticed, he knew he had been betrayed by Guilty Spark, which started the war, which started the Sentinels to just try to fight off the humans. Guilty Spark had to find a way to activate the Halo since he had no Reclaimer or human to activate it. So he decided to try to find multiple ways to try to, or at least save the Halo from being exploded. Eventually, Master Chief and Sergeant Johnson, along with Cortana, had made it safely out of the ring explosion and made it back to Earth just in time. Meanwhile, Zelvanamy, the leader of the Covenant ships that you had to fight in Halo CE, was on trial for his failure to protect the Halo ring. He was eventually convicted of heresy. He couldn't even do anything because of the demon and the parasite. Meanwhile, on their way was a small Covenant fleet to try and find some artifacts that could lead to the Ark. It was Regret's fleet, but they didn't know that there were going to be any humans on Earth. So they were really surprised when they found humans. Eventually, the Covenant fleet would arrive, surprising the humans but also scaring them at the same time, because their homeworld was found by the Covenant, not knowing that the Covenant were confused, scrambling over why humans were there. Eventually, they found a bomb on the carrier station, but luckily they managed to take off the bomb, and Chief had an idea to give the Covenant back their bomb, and by that he meant he was going to put a bomb inside of a Covenant carrier. So here's the cutscene. Eventually, the great schism between the elites and the brutes happens, while the Arbor supports the elites because he's an elite and makes an alliance with humanity to stop Tartarus from activating the Halo. They managed to kill Tartarus and deactivate it before it could kill all life in the galaxy. Meanwhile, the great schism ensued on High Charity. As for the prophets, have managed to escape, but then the humans have found out what happened with their consequences. Guilty Spark tells them that since the Halo was deactivated way too soon, that now not all the Halo rings can be activated from a remote place, which you guys know as the Ark. So humanity and the elites make a plan. Try to stop the Covenant from uncovering the Ark. Meanwhile, the Battle of Earth ensues as the Prophets of Truth's fleet has arrived. Luckily, Master Chief was on board the thing, so once he lands on Earth, it'll be really hard for the Covenant to fight. But for now, humanity had to struggle with the Covenant to try and stop him. Catch up to them, sending the Forward onto Dawn and other frigates to try to stop it, but it's too late as the portal activates and all of Troop's fleet goes through the portal. Meanwhile, a surprise is about to hit. Now, this is the point in the game where humanity finally finds out what they mean by the portal to the Ark. As it opens up, the human ships and the Covenant ships are also kinda proposed and not able to move to this. Once they go through, a surprise is about to hit that is surely more terrifying than the Covenant could ever be. This marks the most terrifying day in human history. Once the Prophets of Truth's fleet left, the Flood opened the Nora portal and traveled to Earth, first starting the infection of Earth at Void. This is why it became the scariest day in the history of Earth. Eventually, the elites, along with the humans, made it to Ark, where the Prophet's fleet was waiting, trying to activate the Halos to begin the great journey. This cutscene will show you the opening of the famous level, the Ark.
Group ships, staggered line. Shipmaster, they outnumber us 3-1.
Then it is an even fight.
All cruisers, fire at will.
Burn their mongrel hides.
Truth's ship isn't taking part in the attack. He must have gone to ground.
Roger that, ma'am. We're on him. Kick the door.
Eventually, the battle led to the activation area for the Halos, which was really bad news for both the humans and the elites, as the Prophets could now activate the Halo Ray, killing off all life in the galaxy. But what the Prophets didn't know is that the humans, elites, and Flood would create an alliance to stop this from happening. The only purpose for this was to stop the Halos from activating. Stop Truth, kill him before the Halos would activate, killing everything in the galaxy. It was so serious, in fact, they had to team up. They had no other option. Because if didn't, the Flood, elites, and humans would fight each other. Eventually, they managed to stop Truth with his plan and deactivate the Halo Array. This scene is so iconic because it shows the Arbiter, who was supposed to be a tool of the Prophets, had the Arbiter kill the Prophet. So that's why it's one of the most iconic scenes of all time. After this, the Flood betrayed humanity and the elites. Eventually, the Master Chief, along with the Arbiter, activated the Halo and managed to escape onto the Forward onto Dawn before they could explode. After this, the ceremony of the war had begun. Since it was about 30 years until the war would end, they finally come to an end with humanity barely surviving. They needed the help of the elites to survive, and also the Spartans. So now that the Halo Ring was exploded, the Ark and every single Flood on it would be destroyed. The galaxy would be safe, because it was too far away. So yeah.